Hello and welcome to episode 166 of Daryl Show Your Work. All right, as a reminder, please take advantage of the limited time savings that INE is running on its award winning cybersecurity training and certification programs all March long. Go to get.ine.com/Daryl and apply any of the promo codes in the show notes below to save up to 50% on its catalog of 70 plus hands on learning paths and 3,500 hours of content. So let's get started and let's level up those skills. All right. So in this episode, I'll be showing how to run a custom file and directory brute force attack on, well, I guess scan rather on a web server using Gobuster. So if you remember in episode, I believe it was 56, I used Gobuster, but it was part of a more elaborate or larger focus or focus that particular project to um to find a vulnerability and then to exploit that vulnerability. So in this particular episode, I'm going to focus more on ways we can run those custom GoBuster scans on directories and ways again we can specify broaden some of those scans or narrow in on specific items. And ultimately, I am going to use it in an attempt to be able to find a vulnerability. All right, but I'm not going to go as far into exploiting it here. So the main focus on this episode is going to be a GoBuster in itself. All right, so first, let's conduct some discovery. So I need to first find out what my IP address is. So I'm gonna say ifconfig. All right, so it looks like I am 192.253.69.2 since I am operating on network interface Ethernet 1. So let's copy this. All right. So next thing I want to do is I want to conduct a ping sweep of my local network to see whether what other machines are up and running. So this is going to send ICMP packets to all the machines that are on my local subnet, and whoever's up and running is going to respond back, and that's how I'm going to choose my target host. So I'm going to use fping to do this. So I'm going to say fping-a-g, and I'm gonna paste in that IP address, and I'm gonna change this to a 0/24, which is my CIDR address, which again is telling fping to send ICMP packets to everything within this IP range. All right. So as usual, we have dot one, dot two, and dot three that's up. Dot one being the gateway. I'm not going to mess with that. Two being myself. So dot three looks like it's our target host. So let's run an nmap scan here and let's see what ports are open. All right, so I'm gonna do a service scan here, and this shouldn't take very long. All right, so I'm gonna post my IP address here, alter that to 3 since we know that that's the target host now. And let's get that running. All right, so we can see that port 80 is open and port 3306 is running. Okay, and we can see that it's running Apache. So we were enumerating this target host to see if it's running the LAMP stack. We can see that it's running 2 letters out of LAMP here, A for Apache and M for MySQL. All right, so there's nothing necessarily indicative. Oh, actually, and then L for Linux, because we can see that is running Ubuntu. So perhaps, when we jump further into using GoBuster here, we could do some further enumeration and see whether or not it's using the P in LampStack, which is the PHP web language. All right, so now we see that port 80 is open. Let's take a visit there and let's see what's being hosted on port 80. All right, so I'm just going to plug in the target host into my web browser here. Let's see where it takes us. All right, so again, another instance of multi-day. All right, so again, this is a a kind of a test environment for web penetration testers that has a variety of different vulnerabilities in it. So it's there to just to help people to be able to find and identify a variety of web vulnerabilities. All right. So from here, I'm going to begin running Gobuster. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to run a basic Gobuster scan on this target host using already built-in word list within Kali Linux here. All right, it's called common.txt. All right, so I'm going to say Gobuster. And I'm a dir for a directory mode since I'm targeting a directory. Oh, well, multiple. I wanted to find multiple directories here by brute forcing a target host. And again, what Gobuster is going to do. And I'm sorry, I don't think I ever reviewed what Gobuster is. My apologies. And so Gobuster is a software tool that's used for brute forcing directories on web servers. It's not pre-installed on Kali Linux. So if you wanted to install that on Kali Linux here, I'm not going to install it, but I'm going to just show you the command to use. You would do a sudo apt install Gobuster, all right? And that's how you would get Gobuster either on your Kali distribution or whatever compatible distribution of Linux that you're using, all right? So essentially, what how it works is simple to other brute forcing tools such as a Hydra. It's going to target has a user word list that contains common names for directories, and it's going to use that word list to try to discover some directory names, and based on the return codes, it's going to then let me know what directories are present, and I'm going to try to visit those directories to see what I can dig up from there. All right, so let's go back to, I don't think I actually executed that, so I have to write it again. So I'm gonna say go buster, all right, and then dir for directory mode, and then dash u, and this is where I would specify the URL or the host name here. All right, so I'm gonna put the target host here, changing that two to a 3, and then I'm gonna say dash w to specify the word list, and I'm gonna say slash user slash share. So I'm giving it the directory the um, that the word list is contained here within my Kali distribution. All right, drb, and then common.txt is the actual word list name. All right, so again, this is going to execute Gobuster in directory mode to brute force the target host using the common.txt word list to discover any directories that it may hidden directories that it may have. All right, so ultimately my goal here is discovering any hidden or unlinked files on this web server. All right, so that finished pretty fast. So if we go up here, there's a couple of things that I want to point out. So it tells us the HTTP method that the brute force used, which is the get method. All right. So that's how that's the method that is using to try to discover directories. And in threads, that's just speaking towards basically the speed of the brute force. So we can decrease this if we want to become more stealthy and reduce the speed of the brute force to not trigger any sort of intrusive detection systems. All right, and then the word list, of course, is common.txt, and it also appears our target host. And then we can see negative status code. So right now it says 404, but this is actually something, and I'm going to show it later on, something that I can actually modify to specify what what status codes are considered negative. And once I specify that, it's going to omit those status codes here. So we have a much more clean looking list of findings and not just a bunch of 404s. Basically, the failures to find the directories searched for within the list. And then we go to user agent here. I can modify this here to make it look more like a web browser was trying to access these directories rather than Gobuster, because again we want to we want to be stealthy, and we don't want to set off any sort of security controls that may be looking for any anomalous behavior. But that's a bit outside the scope of what I'm gonna show here, but I'm definitely going to show how we can modify the negative status codes. So just reviewing the results here a bit. All right, so 200 status code is a successful status code, and it basically tells us that 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 found the name of the directory that was brute force. And the 301 is successful as well. It's just going to, instead of just coming up as 200, maybe, like for instance, the name of the directory wasn't necessarily slash Ajax, but then it was this full rendering of the directory. So it was the IP address of the target host and then Ajax. So it's just showing the redirect of that particular directory. So it's still considered a successful finding. So what I want to do is I want to look at one of these, and I'm going to find a 200 status code to verify. All right. So let's go to this phpinfo.php. Let's see if we can access that. So anything we find on the list here, we want to be able to verify that directory exists. All right, so I'm gonna go back here to my web browser. All right, and then I'm gonna add slash php info dot php. All right, so it actually takes me to the secret PHP server configuration page. All right, so this is giving me the the version of the PHP server being used on the back end, as well as some other specifications. So I believe I've shown this in a previous video, but I can use this information here to use like a database, or a database such as like Searchsploit or Metasploit, to be able to search for version specific vulnerabilities, and then be able to execute that against the target host here, which again, like I said in the beginning, that's beyond the scope of this video, but just wanted to explain what can be done once I've obtained this information from this Gobuster scan. But another thing that this does verify too is that now we verified the P in our lamp stack. All right, so now we know that the back end technology is indeed the lamp stack, which is a common combination of I'm trying to think of the word that I'm trying to think of, but a combination of technology that's used when hosting web applications, or web services. Okay, so I wanted to verify one other thing. Let's verify one of the 303s, just so I can show that 303s are considered successful tools. So let's go to documentation. Let's see what's there, since documentation came back as a 301. All right. All right, and this takes me to the documentation directory. So, all right, so we were able to verify at least one of these 200 codes are indeed at a directory that's present on this machine, as well as one of the 301s. All right, so the next thing that I wanted to get into is how we could customize the negative status codes here. So let's say that I wanted to clean up this list a bit, and I didn't want to see like any 403s, because 403s aren't considered successful. All right, so to be able to define that here, I would just add dash B, and anything that's specified after B, any status code that I specify after B is basically B is for blacklist. So to blacklist these particular status codes, which will omit them from the list of the Gobuster scan and clean it up a little bit and just basically show me the status codes or the directories that I want to see. All right, so I'm gonna say 403 and then comma 404. All right. So let's run this again, and this should omit those status codes, which it does. All right. So now we just see everything with a 200 and a 301 status code. And let's say that I just wanted 200 status codes. All right. So I can also add 301 to this as well. All right. And then now we just have a list of all 200s and completely just cleans it up and shows me the exact status code that I want to see here. All right. So let's say I wanted to dive into a bit more specific. Let's say that I wanted to see specific file types within these directories, and I only wanted to see those file types within 200 or 301 positively returned status codes. All right, so I'm gonna get rid of 301 here, and now I'm gonna say dash X, all right? And then so this is going to specify the X is for extension. So I'm gonna say .php, comma, .xml. Let's see, and what else do I want to use? I'm gonna say .txt. All right. So basically, this is gonna return in all all directories with 200 and 301 return codes. It's going to specify the presence of any PHP or XML or TXT files within those directories. All right. So let's run that. All right, so then it's giving me a bunch of different files that I found here. Now, one thing I didn't specify is 500. So the way, let's say that I wanted to narrow this down even more. Let's say that I wanted to look in one of these specific directories here. So we've seen that we found a directory called data. So I want to look in specifically in the data directory, and I want to run the same scan, but only in this particular directory of the target host. So I'm going to go here in my command. All right. And I'm going to leave everything else the same, but I'm going to add data here. All right. And then make us check my syntax on everything. Still should be good. So let's run that again. All right, so we can see here that I only found one file within data. So let's see if we could find anything interesting in the data directory. First, let's confirm its existence, and then see if we could find anything that's particularly interesting there. All right, so going to the data directory. All right, and we can see that accounts.xml file there. So I'm gonna click on that. And look at what we have here. All right, so we have an unencrypted accounts XML file. Okay, so this is it's straight up telling me that these are the username and passwords for various accounts. So I have an admin username, admin password, and several username and passwords here. So I would consider this aspect if I was, a white hat, black hat, whatever. I would consider this successful as far as enumerating and gathering sensitive information to pivot further or into the system and to move a bit more laterally to whatever my target here is as far as being on this system. And so this is just an example of how Gobuster can be used in any sort of ideally ethical engagement to be able to find sensitive files, which would then help you to move more laterally in the system or pivot to other machines within the system. All right, so this brings me to the end of my video. Again, want to remind you to please go in the show notes, take advantage of those limited time only deals from INE to be able to gain the hands-on skills and in-demand certifications that employers within the cybersecurity arena are looking for. And until next time, Take care of yourself, and God bless. And remember to show your work.